Joining me now on the Knicks Film School Podcast, a returning guest. He doesn't cover the Knicks. He's not a Knicks fan or anything. But I don't know that we have many guests on here who are more of a New Yorker than this man. And I'm reminded of that every time I see his background for when he steps in front of the mic for these podcasts. The Staten Islander in me is going to come out because I hear him talk, and then it's going to be a whole thing. Michael Scotto of HoopsHype. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. There doesn't get much more of a Brooklyn Italian accent than mine. Staten Island got some cousins out there, so all good. And looking forward to being back with the season coming up soon. Media days around the corner, and yes, I'll make some trips to MSG for sure. Looking forward to that. Hopefully, we all go back to normal. That'd be nice.
That would be nice. Are you allowed to live in New York and not have a cousin in Staten Island? I think if you live in the five boroughs or have ever lived in the five boroughs, you have a cousin in Staten Island. That's a New York law. It has to be.
It's funny because everybody says, how far are you away from your family and things like that. And I'm just like, well, all the town, everybody in Brooklyn, we just walk where we got to go to see them. They're not that far away. Like we're not, Staten Island, that's different. I got to pay the toll to go out there. It's like, I love you so much as my family that I pay to go see you over this bridge.
I was about to say, you go over a bridge. A very quick aside. We live in Carroll Gardens, and like
you live in Carroll Gardens.
You did not know this? Oh, this is live.
I'm in Cobble Hill. How do we not cross paths?
I've said it before, so I can say it here. I'm on, and yeah.
I will definitely not say where I live, but I'm very close. I'm very close. I will tell you that,
and I will definitely bleep, as I usually do, John saying his address from the top.
Okay. I've had some good neighbors. I've had Kenny Atkinson lived on my block.
Okay.
Who else? Jalil Okafor lived in very close by. Shabazz Napier.
He's probably hanging out with all these guys.
Relatively close used to be Jared Allen. A little bit more towards Barclays Center, but
I was
not
about
bad.
to say,
yeah. Kenny used to walk to the arena. He used to tell me, which I think is hilarious. But that's a good 25-minute walk. But good for him.
It's good. A little bit of extra. I brought it up because I was going to say, everybody is within walking distance. Like there's new Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens, and then there's old Cobble Hill, Carroll Gardens. And you walk around this area and you see those people who have been a part of the fabric community for 30, 40 years. They're not going nowhere. All their family lives within a 5-block radius. So it's great. It's great stuff. Yeah. All right, we're off to a rousing start for our NBA conversation. So we were making light of it before we started recording. It's been an interesting offseason involving some teams in the Atlantic Division that have had, I think, especially with everything going on in Boston now, with news continuing to trickle out and with the suspension being handed down, the sorts of off seasons that maybe the Knicks have been known for in the past. And here are the Knicks. And were they kind of in this Donovan Mitchell thing and they didn't end up getting him? And there was some discussion about what maybe did go down or didn't go down with that whole thing. Sure. But for the most part, I don't know. It's been a normal offseason, especially in comparison to, again, the team that plays down the road from us here in Brooklyn and in Boston. I don't know. What are your overall impressions of New York's offseason? Let's start there.
My thoughts, Jonathan, is that I think it was very much a Knicks offseason. Once again, they got linked to a star player and they didn't end up getting him. But I think for the Knicks, and I've said this to other people, the Knicks draft picks, right? The unprotected picks.
Yeah.
I think that those were more valuable than Cleveland's picks because Cleveland is a team that already has 3 core guys that are all-star caliber players, and they weren't going to be most likely, at best, maybe just inside the lottery, barely, like last year. Those guys are ascending. They're rising. They're not taking a step back. So I thought the Knicks picks would have been worth more. And I'll say this. If Quentin Grimes is not Allen Houston or something, right? Let's just say that.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of like when they were haggling over Melo and Timothy. They're like, we're not moving Timothy,
baby.
And I'm just like, guys, it's like if you kept Quentin Grimes, plays the same position as Donovan Mitchell. So, I mean, that was one way I looked at it. Another way was I thought Donovan Mitchell would have been a good maybe number 2, but it would have been a step in the right direction, I thought, because I think Jalen, when he was with the Dallas Mavericks, Jalen Brunson showed that he could be a number 2 in the playoffs. I wouldn't bank on that here. I think, being with Luka helped, but I think he's like a fine maybe third guy. Julius Randle could be a third guy. RJ Barrett can be a third guy on a championship team. This is how I always view teams. And when I talk to like executives around the league, they view guys as what they could be on a championship team, because that's what everybody's trying to get to at some point. And so I think with Donovan, that was the one that got away. I won't say I think. In talking with a lot of executives, the New York Knicks were the preeminent favorite to get Donovan Mitchell. And the fact that they didn't surprised some people around the league. Some weren't, because once it got leaked about who was doing the negotiations and things like that, like it just seemed like the further this went along, there was more room for it to fall apart. And it did. It got close and then it fell apart. I think the RJ Barrett extension, one, I think it does a couple things. It sets the table for Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero now has to look at that extension and try to get that, if not more, I think. 2, I think that for the Knicks, when it got announced, like right after the Donovan Mitchell trade got reported, the timing of that I didn't think was necessarily ideal.
It was within 3 minutes, I believe. The tweet was.
It was so cheeky to me. It was unbelievable.
It's a kind word.
I think Jalen Brunson, I think, is a fine point guard. I think he's one of the better point guard additions they've had. What I would say to you, and I've said this to a lot of people, and other executives will say this. He got paid a little bit more than I think we all thought. At a certain point, we were thinking and talking with execs and even myself, 22 million, maybe. All right, maybe 25, maybe. Then as the playoffs got on, by the time he got what he got now, we were like, wow. And so I really think with that, Isaiah Hartenstein, I thought was a fine addition for them.
Love Hartenstein here.
He's a little bit underrated. For Knicks fans that don't know, he's a really good passer.
Yep.
Isaiah.
They know if they listen to this show.
Okay. Well, there you go. I mean, he's a really good passer. I think he's an excellent backup big, and he'll complement Mitchell Robinson well. They bring back Mitchell Robinson. I thought he got maybe $2 million more than I thought. Fair deal. But he's got to stay out of foul trouble. And I would love to see him really realize his potential. I feel like he's been a guy that's kind of been on this type of trajectory from his rookie year. It's just been like a leveling out. It's almost like a monotone voice. Doesn't go high, doesn't go too low. It's just stagnant.
It's actually not a terrible comp for Mitch. Yeah, but he there's highs, there's lows, but when the aggregate is kind of at the end, you look at it and you're like, kind of monotone.
And I think, for the Knicks, they're kind of in this in between of, you've got some really good young guys. Obi Toppin, I think, showed at the end of last year when he had a larger role, he can do more. But he's never going to get that opportunity with Julius Randle there. Not big minutes. Emmanuel Quickly, fine microwave kind of scorer off the bench. Quentin Grimes, really good shooter, good defensive guy. Tibbs doesn't usually like rookies like that. So the fact that he does like him like that, I think is interesting. Cam Reddish kind of fallen off the grid a little bit.
I want to get back to him. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure we will. I thought he would have a larger role when he got here, but it never materialized. And I'm trying to think, am I missing?
Did you mention Quickly?
beside the Barrett extension? Am I missing any other moves that I'm forgetting off the top of my head?
No other moves. No other moves this summer.
It was a fine. I think it was a fine offseason. I just think that if they would have gotten Donovan Mitchell, with the Knicks, I feel like some people would criticize the Knicks. Wow, they gave up too much.
Yeah.
Okay. Now they didn't get him. They didn't get him either. And it's like, well, you got to pick one side of the coin. Now, I think, again, those picks would have been more valuable from the Knicks. So they had a stance on it, and I've been asked kind of, I feel like I'm going on a tangent, but I feel
because I want to get back to all this stuff, but keep going.
I know like people be like, oh, well, who's the next guy? Who's the next guy they're going to look at? And some people have mentioned to me, and I talk about this with Stephen Bondi at the New York Daily News on the HoopsHype podcast. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander comes up, and I'm just saying to him, and I'll say it to you, your audience as well. I don't get it. I don't get the Shai Gilgeous-Alexander hype because one, Shai just signed a large extension with the Oklahoma City Thunder, which
5 years, no player option is literally just kicking in in a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah. Like Sam Presti mentioned it in a press conference that he committed there. And I just feel like in talking with those guys in OKC, it's like they have no urgency to trade him at all. Their stance is he's a guy that's a core guy that they're going to build with going forward. And on top of that, Jonathan, that the Chet Holmgren injury hurts. They know that is going to set them back this year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander already got hurt. We don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of the season yet. They're going to have to reevaluate him after a grade 2 sprain. I forget what body part it was. I'd have to look back at.
I know it's the bottom half of the body. I believe it is. Yeah. I think it's an MCL or some combination of letters.
Yeah, and so it's like, if you're I don't really know where's this next star. I think you have to wait a little. I kind of always wondered. I don't think this would happen, but would you ever trade all those picks and try to get Kevin Durant? But it won't happen. It won't happen. I don't think.
I think there's a better likelihood they'll trade those picks to get you to suit up for them at starting small forward. Let's work backwards because you mentioned SGA, and I get the SGA stuff obviously sitting here in my position a lot as well, and I have the same response as you. And I thought Presti's answer to for his media day questioning today was that was appropriate. It's like it feels to him, he was, for anybody who didn't hear it or read it, basically he's like, Donovan Mitchell got traded, so people are looking for, okay, well, who's the next star who's going to get traded? And because he got traded or he got put on the block, now it's like, oh, well, let's go talk about this guy. Meanwhile, there's no basis in fact for why they would trade him. And to me, it's like, okay, if he asked out, I guess that's one thing, but we just saw you mentioned Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant asked out. He didn't get traded. So, obviously there's limits to how much a guy is going to be able to get moved, even if he wants out. And
whose fault that is, Jonathan?
Who?
That's Rudy Gobert's fault.
Well,
because Rudy Gobert, you ask any executive around the NBA, Rudy Gobert screwed up the trade market. And I'll tell you right now, from a Knicks perspective, he slowed up the market for Donovan Mitchell because once the Utah Jazz got those boatload of draft picks from the Minnesota Timberwolves, their stance was, okay, we think Donovan Mitchell is better, if not on par with Rudy Gobert. So you got to come with that type of deal. Like that set the market. Let alone this was even after the DeJounte Murray trade. They thought, people thought, the Hawks might have gave up a little too much there. That's nothing compared to the Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert, I've got cousins in Minnesota, and I think Tim Connelly was trying to put them in the deal too for Rudy Gobert personally. They're in Cottage Grove in Minnesota, but last I checked, I don't think they got included in the trade, but it's unbelievable. And then you go to the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes, and that got, stretched. And then if you're the Nets, with Sean Marks, it's like, Mike, I can't do it. I can't take these scallywags. You don't want to give up, Jaron Jackson.
That's impressive. That's impressive.
You don't want to give up Desmond Bain. I had John Moran. I can't go to Josiah. I can't do it. I can't do it, mate. And I love Sean. Sean's a good guy. If he ever saw this, he'd probably laugh and knows I'm being cheeky.
Is that word again? Cheeky. we're already off the rails. Let me try to bring us back. Yeah, no, just on the SGA, the SGA thing. Like I've said it to our listeners, like if you are Sam Presti and you do wake up one morning and be like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and trade Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like, why would you trade him for a grab bag of picks and like no doubt about it, young players when you already have a really nice collection of picks and, no doubt about it, young players.
Yeah, Jonathan, the other thing is like if Knicks fans thought that the Utah package was going to be too much for Donovan Mitchell, what do you think Sam Presti would want for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on a 5-year deal? It's just the optics of it to me. We're like,
I never really got that, and I think maybe I'm actually hopeful that that noise goes away after his press conference today. And like, I don't see that was part of for me. Right. Like, I think I was in a little bit of a minority amongst Knicks fans in terms of the Mitchell thing because I was very open and upfront about it that I wanted Mitchell. I was like, I think they need to get him with the price that it would have ended up costing him. Would I have wanted them to pay that price? No, but at the same time, I look around at the market and like, you could say there's always going to be another star, but is it going to be the star that's on the Knicks timeline? And is it going to be a star that kind of, was Mitchell a perfect fit? No, but did he slot into a position on the team?
I thought he would have been at 25. I think he's,
the age I think would have been fine. I think the fit issues with Brunson, you have some concerns about how to build out the rest of your team. I think those are valid. But to the very first point you made, I said it months ago. I said I thought the Knicks' best asset, so to speak, in the trade negotiations was their own organizational incompetence in the past. Because you look at that and you say, well, what are the odds that those picks are going to be good? And if you go by the last 20 years, you would think, like you said, you'd rather have those picks than the picks of a team with 3, young all-stars or soon to be all-stars. Yeah. Which is a good transition because you mentioned the RJ Barrett extension. Yeah. You recently put out a piece for HoopsHype. I loved it. In which I guess you or folks at HoopsHype polled, was it 15 execs around the league?
Yeah, I did it.
Yeah. You did it. Okay. So even better. I talked to the man himself. And it was basically a ranking of, you asked 15 execs ranked 1 through 5.
Yep.
Who do you want to build your team around?
Everybody that was 24 and under. Yeah.
24 and under. And there were 13 or 14 players who received at least one vote. Yep. And, I thought it was an appropriate representation of the pecking order of the best young, quote unquote, young players in the NBA. Luka's number 1 and like it goes down from there. Yeah. And like, those are all, if they're not max guys already, like with the last guy on the list, Halliburton's getting a max, right? If you had to bet right now?
Circle back with me on that one. I don't know about a max. To me, that's a lot, but I mean, usually they get it when they are younger. I thought like the top 3, like Luka this year was a unanimous choice. Last year, he was not. Last year, one exec actually voted for LaMelo Ball, number 1.
Over Luka, wow.
And I was shocked. But, then he told me the reasoning, and I was like, to each their own. Jason Tatum was number 2. John Moran was 3. I thought that all made sense. Where I think the board shifted comparative to last year was Evan Mobley finished 4th and Anthony Edwards finished 5th.
I was shocked Mobley was ahead of Edwards. I'll be honest.
I think, some people questioned where was Zion Williamson, but a lot of executives were worried about his health.
Yeah, which is reasonable.
Scotty Barnes at 7, I thought was interesting because I think Scotty is a really good complementary piece, but I don't think he's necessarily a focal point of a team. He's a very versatile forward and can do a lot of things, but I thought that was interesting. Then LaMelo came in at 8. The other surprise was Trae Young was 9th.
Tied for 9th with Garland, right?
Yeah, I thought that was a surprise because Trae Young, you look at his numbers, man, sensational. Scoring the ball, efficient, from the field, from 3, gets, 9 assists a game, something like that. I mean, Trae, I just think that was a product of the Hawks, maybe underwhelming, but I don't think that was Trae Young's fault, personally.
I mean, my 2 cents on Trae Young, I think it's an interesting question because it's like if you have a guy whose ceiling is top 5 offensive player in the league, and I think there are probably some people who would argue he's a top 5 offensive player in the league, like right now. Mm-hmm. If that's his ceiling, but his ceiling on the other end is never going to be higher than like one of the 5 worst defensive players in the league. Like how do you reconcile that as far as determining your ceiling as a team?
Yeah.
And, where do you go if you have to build around him, you have to leave him on the floor at all times. But I guess you could quibble about the rankings. You could quibble about where some guys are. Like Darius Garland, again, was tied for 9th with Trae Young. Darius Garland just got a full max. Cade was 11. Barring something strange, he's probably going to wind up getting a max. Jalen Green, same thing. SGA was 13th, tied for 13th with Halliburton. SGA has a max. Halliburton, you say, okay, maybe Halliburton doesn't get the full max. Like the whole RJ thing of it all, like RJ didn't get the max. He got, we got about $100 million. I mean, I think the actual guaranteed number was like 106, right? Yeah. Which is a nice amount of money, but it's not what you see from these level of young building block players. And this is not Leon Rose's opinion, or maybe you spoke to Leon Rose. They're anonymous, but like, this is not explicitly Leon Rose's opinion. It's not explicitly Danny Ainge's opinion. This is 15 random executives around the league. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting because, there are a lot of people who view RJ Barrett as like he should be as untouchable as, let's say, a Halliburton or an SGA or a Garland or some of the other guys maybe on the bottom part of that list. And I'll ask you, like executives around the league, do they maybe see him as like one notch down from that or maybe something else?
Well, first off, I thought, the whole stuff about where he would be in the Utah stuff, I thought that was interesting, Jonathan. To me, it surprised me that, that was a point of contention because I didn't get this. I heard mixed things on whether Utah really wanted him like that or not.
As far as they wanting him,
as far as him
them versus to flip him,
as far as him absolutely having to be in there, like I think they would have took picks in substitute for him if he wasn't going to be in it. I
agree.
But with that said, I don't think obviously the Knicks wanted to do that either. But like, so what's the view of RJ around the league from executives? I would say that. Is there a belief that like maybe he can make like an all-star team at some point? There are a few, but I do think some people worry a little bit about athletically and the shot, his athleticism and his shot. I think he's a fine building block, but he's not a franchise player. He is a guy that maybe can be an all-star at a certain point, but it's not a lock. And the East just got tougher now with Donovan Mitchell come in and whatnot too. So, yeah, I think, Jonathan, you hit the point is that, he didn't get a max contract. He got the 107, which is a fine number that's guaranteed, and he has incentives to build it up. But I think there's your answer. Not only from the Knicks, but I think around the league, I don't think RJ would have got a max. But yeah. I mean, if you like really were trying to get him, but
I do think there would have been one team because all it takes is one, right? We're with half the league projected to have cap space next summer. Is there one team that would have given him to him? I think there would have been, but obviously we don't know what he's going to do this year, so that's a little bit of like speculation.
If I was hypothetically answering that. I'd have to think about it because if you're an organization outside of New York where you drafted this guy, and I think he was the first guy to get a second deal since Charlie Ward, right? So
first round pick to get a second deal because Mitch got the extension also.
So, yeah, I mean, to me, that's That's kind of where it begins and ends. Like, I think it was more value to him with the Knicks, and the cap is expected to go up a large amount. So I think from their standpoint, the Knicks feel like he'll mature into that well. But I will say they also thought that with Julius Randle. And to this point, Randle took a step back compared to his all-star season. He got back into old habits with turning the ball over, not being as much of a passer. So I'm curious to see and his three-point shooting went down a little bit. I'm curious to see what Julius Randle, the Knicks, get next year, because truthfully, that's what matters. The thing I would say about Randle, though, is I don't think, like, with Julius Randle as your number one guy, you have a ceiling. And I thought the year that the Knicks had the 4 seed and it was the bubble, like, that was the best case of the best cases of scenarios. And I just thought that set unrealistic expectations. I believe that. And I think if you asked some people in that front office, they would have said the same thing, heart to heart. So now the expectation level recalibrates. And I'm curious to see, like, with this Knicks team with Brunson and pretty much a lot of the core guys back, what are you now? Are you a 35-win team? Like, what is the peak here? I mean, that's interesting to me.
Or we didn't mention it yet, but like earlier today, we're recording this on Thursday night. Detroit made a trade. They traded for Bojan Bogdanovic. Like, they're clearly going to make a run for the play-in in the East this year. I don't know how realistic that is, but like, you said it, the East is a lot better. You mentioned Randle. I know you spoke again to Bondi about Randle a few weeks ago, and you talked about how executives around the league looked at his play last year and they were like, well, about speculating basically about his attitude. And like, it was pretty clearly, it's a guy that seems to wear his emotions on his sleeves. And we saw that with the thumbs down thing and the whole thing last year. You mentioned also him getting back into old habits. Like, the biggest question of the offseason for me pre-Donovan Mitchell was, does Julius Randle have any trade value around the league? And do the Knicks look at him at this point, again, with an extension that hasn't really even kicked in yet? This is the first year of the extension. Do they look at him as someone that they already are thinking about moving on from? And it's funny. It's like we're 3 months later or 3.5 months later. I still don't feel like I have a great answer to that, other than that, like, yeah, do I think that they would move him in a deal that they liked? From what I understand, I think they would. But even that, like, what's a deal that they like? So do you have any insight on anything else where Randle is concerned?
I don't. You asked me if he has trade value. It's like, I don't know if he's considered a positive trade asset.
I don't think he is.
Yeah, I mean, but how negative would it be? Well, I'll say this. He was never going to Utah. That never made sense in a rebuild. I think some people wondered, like, when the Knicks were talking to Utah, if they were going to involve the Lakers in like a 3-team trade with Westbrook going to Utah and then getting waived, and maybe Cam Reddish possibly going to the Lakers because they've liked him. Some people might have wondered, well, maybe could he go to LA or something like that? I didn't hear that.
Okay.
So I don't really know who would be. I'll say this. I don't know who would give him as big a role as New York right now, to be honest, on a team. Like, even when he was with the Pelicans years ago, he didn't have like that type of role that he has with the Knicks. So I think the best thing for both sides would be Julius. I don't think the year he was an all-star, I think he was like 24 and 11 or something, 10.
Yes, he was 24, there. 11 and 6, basically.
Yeah. I think that was the peak.
I think we could safely say that he's not getting above. Better than that would be first team All NBA, and I don't know if I foresee that.
My whole thing is like, what I thought was interesting, Jonathan, was they didn't have to give him an extension at that point. They could have played a season out and
But don't you think they kind of not literally? Obviously they didn't have to, but once because a year ago, and correct me if I'm wrong, it felt like after his second team All NBA campaign, there was a lot of talk like, well, Julius could enter the market in I guess it would have been this summer, 2022, and maybe get a full max, whereas he was only eligible at that point for the 20% raise, which there was a difference of I don't know, north of $50 million between those two numbers. I felt like at the time there was a sense like that he was willing to accept that, like the max he could get then. It would have been crazy for the Knicks, or would have been at the time. I would have certainly been like, wow, if he's willing to take that, you got to give it to him. Now, in retrospect, obviously, I have egg on my face. So,
I mean, look, Julius. I thought the biggest thing was the 3-point percentage for him. That was the biggest change in his game, as much as like the turnovers and stuff. But I thought Donovan Mitchell might have helped him a little bit. I'm curious if Brunson, like a true point guard, if that's going to help him or not. We'll see.
I was about to say, it seems we're going to find out because it's, this episode's dropping Friday. Camp's going to open on Tuesday. Yeah. We'll see what happens. A couple more in the minute. I'll get you out of here. You mentioned Cam a few times. If you'd asked me a couple of weeks ago, is Cam going to be on this team when camp opens? I would have said no. I would have said they would find a trade for him somewhere to a team, even if it was like something where they get back like one of those fake first round picks where it's like, top 20 protected for 1 year and then it converts to like 2 seconds or so, something where a team feels
I don't know if that's there though, Jonathan.
So the fact that he's still on the roster, that's what I want to ask you. Yeah. Should I be sitting here reading this as like, oh, the Knicks aren't completely out on Cam. They want to see maybe does someone get injured? Does he find his way into the rotation? Maybe something's still there. Or is it basically that like there's just no market right now for a team that would be willing to value that?
His value went down because the Knicks gave up a first for him. And I don't believe there's a team that's given up a first for Cam Reddish.
Even like a protected low level, something like that.
I mean, how many protections can you put on it? I think it's, it would have to be so heavily protected. It's never going to come to fruition. But I think even then, if you're the Knicks, why would you trade him at that point?
Okay.
Why don't you? Here's a crazy thought. Play the kid. It's crazy.
There's a lot of fans like, your music to, preaching to the choir there.
I mean, it's going to be a little tough to play him now because you look at this team and Quentin Grimes has gotten minutes, but like I'll say this to Knicks fans, I would believe if Cam Reddish is still on this roster at some point, he's going to get in that rotation. And I say that because you can't trade a guy if you don't showcase him. You got to play him.
Let's talk about it for a second because when you were on with Bondi, you talked about how some people around the league maybe have questions about his drive to, I think the way you put it was like to fulfill his potential. For me, I have questions about like, well, when he came here, he had a press conference. He said, I see myself as a star. Is that a concern in and of itself where it's like, do teams just want a guy who's going to be willing to accept a role that is more seemingly in line with what his production has been, which is maybe like a 3-and-D with like a little bit of creation upside. So I think that's like an issue.
Well, I'll say this, Jonathan, there are some executives that feel he has this raw talent, size, the skill with the ball, that it hasn't materialized yet. And there are teams that always think, well, we can fix this guy. We can get it out of him. And it's like you saw with Golden State with Andrew Wiggins. Yeah. Well, sure. You put somebody in an ideal position, yeah. But I think with Cam, he hasn't shown he could shoot the ball consistently. He's been inconsistent. Even when he was at the end of his tenure with the Hawks, he'd have a couple 30-point games, and then
in the playoffs, towards the very end,
it was never consistent. And for the Knicks, like him coming and saying about being a star, I think he thought like he and RJ would kind of have this like tandem together. Maybe put him at the 3, RJ at the 2, and it never materialized that way.
And Ian Begley, who is a great reporter here for SNY, even reported recently that when Cam, I think maybe when he first got here, or maybe towards the beginning of the summer, one or the other, there were some people within the organization that thought about like, hey, let's start him and RJ together. But now we're here. We just talked about Randle. There's not a market for him. Fournier, we don't need to talk about Fournier. It's pretty clear that there's no market for Fournier, as the reports were that they were going to have to include a protected pick to dump him in the Mitchell deal. So like both of those guys are going to play some kind of minutes. You mentioned Grimes, you mentioned Quickly, RJ, you go through the list, and then you basically get down to like, all right, for Cam to play, it's like, I guess Derrick Rose would be the odd man out. And like, okay, well, I know there's a lot of Knicks fans.
Thibodeau's dead body.
Well, again, you're preaching to the choir here for a lot of people.
I was in his wedding. You think he ain't mentioned him?
No, exactly. But that's what. So, and then like I've said, well, play Rose a little bit, maybe build up his trade value. But then that brings me to the trade that went down today. Bojan Bogdanovic. A lot of people, there was speculation that maybe he could net a first. What is he? He's a 33-year-old expiring contract. He got traded for matching salary, a little bit less matching salary.
I say this.
Do you think Derrick Rose, there would be any kind of a market?
Not a first-round pick for Derrick Rose, no.
Okay, well, there you go.
Can you get seconds? Maybe 1 or 2, yeah.
And are the Knicks going to do that? Again, over Tom Thibodeau's dead body.
I don't see. It depends where they're at. But, circle back with me a couple of months into the season. Because this is what happens, Jonathan. A lot of teams, and this could tie into Kevin Durant too. And I'll explain what I mean. So usually NBA executives I talk to, there's usually like a waiting period once you start the season. 20 games, 25 games. And you see where your team is at. And what they'll do is a lot of times the teams that are underperforming, they will circle around them like vultures and see if they're desperate enough to make a move. Maybe it's a job-saving move, because you got to remember now, a lot of executives are going away from we're going to retool. You rebuild, you buy yourself time. Look at what the Orlando Magic did. Look at what the Indiana Pacers are doing now. Okay. It resets the clock on your job as an executive. So that's where it's like, can you get future assets? With Bojan Bogdanovic, I think Andy Larson of the Salt Lake Tribune reported this, but they could have got first, but it would have took on additional salary. I do think they could have got a first for him, but
okay.
I don't know what those future salaries would have been. But I figured like, Phoenix, they were mentioned as a suitor, and Jay Crowder's name. I figured they would try to throw Jay and an asset to get them. I'm not saying that happened. Just my thought. Me.
No, aggregators take heed.
Yeah, they're funny sometimes. But I mean, I do work at HoopsHype, so it's like a lot of people, if you don't see it in our rumors section,
it's not a real rumor.
There you go. But that's a meme right there too. But so I mean, I wasn't shocked. Actually, I will say this. I don't know. Like, to me, I was like, why are the Pistons going for Bojan Bogdanovic? Like, he's going to make them better. And I know he's an expiring contract, but I don't know. Why are you stunting Sadiq Bey's growth? You going to put him at the 4? I don't see that. Like, not good enough defensively for that. So, again, I don't run these teams. I just report what's said, but I do have my opinions, and I didn't get that one for sure.
I think it was an interesting move for a team, but even if you question the move, which I did too, I think a lot of people did for the exact reasons that you said. It's like, because if you're the Pistons, you got one more really good tanking season in you, probably, if you want it. Yeah. Don't you want to maybe take full advantage of that? But that's clearly not the direction they're going to go. But you know what? At least they have Cade Cunningham and they have Jaden Ivey. And Cade Cade made whatever he made, 9 on that list.
And I like Jalen Duren, I do. But I will say this too. Like, if you're Utah, go replace one Frenchman with another. Rudy Gobert's out. Get Victor Wembanyama.
I'm sure that would be lovely for them.
People asked me about I tweeted this too, because when we did on the winners and losers podcast for HoopsHype, boy, would we edit that if we could about the Celtics. But I would say that everybody, all the rival executives are like, all right, Bojan's going to be the next guy traded. Now I'm looking at Jordan Clarkson to me, because if you're a team that's going to need a score to upgrade your bench later on in the playoffs, go get them. And I don't want to hear this whole, they're all great veterans. They're good for the younger. Listen, man, that don't help the ping pong balls. I don't want to hear that. Who are you so trying to develop on that team? You're not. You're going to draft them later on. You're going to draft them with your own lottery pick and all the future picks that you've been getting for Gobert and Mitchell. Looking ahead, think ahead. That's my thought.
Well, that's a good place to finish up with this because, we've kind of danced around it and you kind of touched on it at the top as far as where the Knicks are as an organization right now. And if they'd gotten Mitchell and retained some draft capital, which they clearly wanted to do. That's why they put Barrett in the trade talks because they wanted to retain as many picks as they could. Yep. You could see that being a direction. Now they didn't get Mitchell. They have what they have here. Do you think, again, you talk to people around the league. Do you think people just feel like, all right, the Knicks are just going to go take the next swing, at the next, again, we talked about SJ, probably not going to happen. Bondi mentioned Devin Booker on your pod.
I love Steph. I didn't get that one.
Maybe if the Sarver thing went a different direction, but now Sarver's out.
You're right. It didn't materialize at that point. But Devin Booker, nah, I don't see that. Because also if you're Phoenix, Chris Paul's not getting any younger. Devin Booker's your franchise guy. And I don't know what the future holds. I know they re-signed Ayton. They matched, the max sheet from Indiana. But it's could you tell me down the line they flip DeAndre Ayton at a certain point? Would I be shocked? My jaw wouldn't hit the floor, I'll tell you that. We'll see. I just think Booker's your franchise guy. I love Steph, but I just didn't agree. I told him on the podcast, I was I don't see that. And that's the thing. That's the problem, Jonathan. I haven't done a real deep dive on this, but this would be for anybody, right? It's not just the Knicks. Who's the next guy that's a star? It's an all-star caliber guy that either wants out or a team is looking to move. I'm not putting Russell Westbrook in that plateau now, given where he is.
Please don't say that name.
So who is it?
I think there are names, but they are imperfect names. I think you can, I forget who, someone may have even said it on the spot. The notion that things could go south very quickly in Washington and they, within a year, could look at and be all right, let's reset, let's see what we could get for Brad. I could see that happening, but is that the guy that you want to, he's going to be 30, whatever. He's going to be 30, 31 years old. Yeah. It's not about just getting a guy who has some all-star teams on his resume. It's about getting the guy who's going to be in line with the age of your theoretical core that's remaining, although maybe that's not that important.
The joke with Bradley Beal at Vegas Summer League was when Mark Bartelstein did the contract, people were joking, did he get an ownership stake in either the Blackhawks or the White Sox? I'm sorry. What am I saying? The Nationals, the Washington Nationals or the Capitals in hockey. So I got a kick out of that. But there has been a loyalty there from Bradley Beal, for better or worse. Now, I also would say that, you get the bag and then you figure it out. Ask Ben Simmons, ask James Harden, ask Donovan Mitchell, ask anybody. That's the way of the NBA now. You get paid and you figure it out later. Even with Zion Williamson, it's people will look at that and go, all right, he just got extended. Yeah, and they can't trade him to a certain point. I'm not saying Pelicans do, but would it shock me if people tried to start that chatter up again from the outside? No. because you just see it all the time. Everybody's on a clock. You know what gets me, Jonathan, too? I get people to ask me about LaMelo Ball putting pressure on the Hornets. I'm like, stop it. What is he going to do? What's he going to do? Pull a Porzingis and be like, I'm going to sign the qualifying offer or not? Like, you take the bag and then you figure it out later if you really want out. You don't lose the guaranteed money because you can't get more anywhere else. I think like NBA Twitter is it's
a fun place.
It's a fun place sometimes. I do like my spaces.
I did one spaces with Chris Persian, who does good stuff for us. I'm waiting to go back into the pool.
I gotta tell you, Jonathan. One time, one Knicks fan on a spaces said to me, like, "Well, how do you they want to like ask you like all these questions and like." I'm just like, bro, like I do this for like, this is my 12th year, bro. Like I just get a kick out of like some of the Knicks fans that it's like, they'll go on.
I think every fan, I'll defend Knicks fans for a sec. I think every fan.
That one particular. Most of
just the one person
will ask me like, there's this guy, Big Mo. That,
I don't know who that is.
Wow.
Should I know who that is, Andrew? I don't know who Big Mo is.
I don't know. Big Mo.
Andrew's giving me this.
I've been in some of his space. Like he'll ask me like fine, like thought-provoking questions. It was just like this one fan. Sometimes I will say this: there was like a spaces going every day when the Donovan Mitchell stuff was going on, like heavy. And it was like he's coming. I'm like, I don't know. Net Spaces was definitely an interesting place with all the KD stuff, and the Lakers Spaces was comedy every night.
You think Russ gets traded before the season?
No, I don't. Okay. And I would say this, Jonathan. It is like, the reason I say that is because if the Lakers are willing to put both those picks, yeah, he's gone. But they don't want to do that right now. There's no team that I talk to wants to take all that salary without trying to get those picks. And I mean, I had touched on it on HoopsHype, but like Indiana wanted Taylor Horton-Tucker too, and for the Lakers to take Daniel Tice. Like they were trying to squeeze all the juice out of the orange with little pulp left. So
you need the pulp.
Because of those factors, I don't see it. Now, what I would say, Jonathan, is if you're the Lakers and you end up having Westbrook, you can either figure it out at the deadline or what. Like I don't think anybody talks about this enough. This contract comes off the books. Go try to sign somebody next summer.
Well, it'll open up 30 if everything goes according to plan. It'll open up about $30 million in space. You could get, someone good for that amount of money. So we're belaboring the point. There is no obvious name. I think that's like the next guy. I would assume executives around the league look at the Knicks as like they're just going to bide their time until that player becomes available, and in the meantime continue to do whatever their version of treading water is. Would that be a fair estimation of where people are at?
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I think they're always going to be. I just expect the Knicks to be a team that is going to be one of those teams that's mentioned as like they're monitoring player X, Y, Z. I'm sure you'll see a lot of that.
Okay. Where does that come?
They've got to figure out. I think they got to figure out what they have with Randle, Barrett, and Brunson. To be honest, you've got to see what that looks like, and then you got to reevaluate and go from there.
I'll ask you just because you brought it up, because like we see that all the time, and I think those sorts of reports drive. I know they used to drive me nuts, and they still do to a certain extent. Not because of the reporting, but because of just like you wonder like. If I'm a fan and I'm reading the Knicks are, let's say again, the Knicks are monitoring the Bradley Beal situation after the Wizards have started off making something up 10-20. What should I as a fan take from that? That
there is the possibility they're looking into acquiring him, but I think I equate that, Jonathan, to when a team says they're doing like due diligence on a guy. You make a call, you see what it was. All right, I'll get back.
Make a call like, hey.
Yeah.
Are you still all in on him, or is he maybe available? That type of thing.
That's the way I look at it personally. Okay. That's like, I don't know. That's like me monitoring a celebrity crush's like Instagram. Yeah, I look to okay, sure. I look to see if she's single. Sure.
Any luck with that?
I'm actually in a pretty. I got a good girlfriend right now.
Okay, there you go.
I can't complain.
You better say that.
Good answer, Mike.
I'm a happy man.
Very good answer, Mike.
I'm a happy man, brother.
You can complain, but you will not complain. That is the better way to put it.
She's good. She don't give me well, not to this point, too much of a reason, but that's like a knock on wood because it's like, once you, circle back with me after the honeymoon stage. Let's talk closer to like the trade deadline when I got to be more like really.
Not after you've just signed the contract. You got to get circled back.
Yeah, right. Like, it's all fine and dandy when you're going out to dinner over here in Cobble Hill. And then, but once it's time to hunker down in the winter.
Hopefully it ages better than the Julius Randle contract. I'll just say that. Mike, this was a lot of fun. Thanks I was looking forward to talking to you and you did not disappoint. For anybody who may not know, can you let the folks at home know where they can find you and check out your stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Biggie said, if you don't know, now you know. Just go on Twitter at Mike A. Scotto, Mike A. Scotto, Scotto, pronounced like the lotto, not Scotto. I get that sometimes and I kind of roll my eyes.
Scotto?
I've gotten that before.
Really?
But yeah, you can check out the HoopsHype podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. And yeah, just, you can keep up with my Twitter. That's me. It's the guy with the verified check and the clean cut face. That's me.
Michael Scotto, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, fellas. Thanks for having me.